This week on the video version of The Business of Tech, economic impact of broadband in rural areas, the new EO focused on customer experiences, all the Log4j news, Cyberinsurance stats, and let's talk about workers and Zoom fatigue. All this and more. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, and here are this week's stories. The headline today is the announcement of vulnerabilities in the Apache Log4j Java-based logging platform, which is used to access web servers and application logs. Nicknamed Log4Shell, there are active exploits in the wild of malware. With a severity score of 10 out of 10, the open-source Apache Software Foundation developed the library and is a critical Java logging framework. Both patches and mitigation techniques are available. Any device exposed to the internet is at risk if it's running Apache Log4j versions 2.0 to 2.14.1. NCSC notes that Log4j version 2, the affected version, is included in Apache Struts 2, Solar, Druid, Flink, and Swift frameworks. With the basics out of the way, let's focus on some of the other business-related details of the exploit. IT News reports how the maintainers of the Java Log4j project had only 3 sponsors, despite the software being a crucial part of large companies' commercial products and enterprise applications. They're now reporting 58, mostly individual sponsors for the project, despite usage from companies like Apple, Microsoft, Steam, Twitter, Baidu, and Cloudflare. CompTIA has made its ISO forum thread available for free to the public due to the nature of this issue. Now, why do we care? This is one of those stories both important to highlight, but nothing new. For end users, this is make sure you're patched. For IT providers, it's roll out patches and ensure mitigation is implemented. And for vendors, it's get your patch out. It's incredibly newsworthy, but not noteworthy, as the playbook is not different. Go forth and run the playbook, because it's time. So giving this some interesting thought, the IT News article offers an expert opinion that, quote, maintainers should become professionalized, sending big companies suitably large invoices for their work, as this is a model that enterprises understand, unlike donation-based funding. As organizations consider the supply chain broadly, if your multi-million-dollar revenue stream is dependent on a couple of volunteers on the internet, maybe that's a risk you should be factoring in, huh? Something to ponder on this chain. And while we're on internet stopping issues, Amazon Web Services has explained what happened with their recent outage. An automated process in the Northern Virginia, U.S. East 1 region caused the problem. An automated activity to scale capacity of one of the AWS services hosted in the main AWS network triggered an unexpected behavior from a large number of clients inside the internal network, Amazon's report says. This resulted in a large surge of connection activity that overwhelmed the networking devices between the internal network and the main AWS network, resulting in delays for communication between these networks. According to the report, this issue even impacted Amazon's ability to see what exactly was wrong with the system. It prevented the company's operations team from using the real-time monitoring system and internal controls they typically rely on, explaining why the outage took so long to fix. Why do we care? I'm pondering a question about monitoring technologies related to Log4Shell, and so this after report from AWS was very timely. Who monitors the monitor? This is precisely what happened to Amazon. Their monitoring systems relied on the systems being monitored, so when there was a problem, blindness. The takeaway is that design element. Maybe monitoring should be its own thing, and perhaps read-only. So looking forward, O'Reilly's 2021 Cloud Adoption Survey gives some directional data. 90% of respondents report that their organizations use cloud computing, up from 88% last year. Further, almost half, at 48%, say they plan to migrate 50% or more of their applications to the cloud in the coming year, with 20% planning to migrate all applications. Among all respondents, 47% say their organizations are pursuing a cloud-first strategy, with 30% already cloud-native, with applications built to run in a scalable cloud environment. Another 37% plan to be cloud native within 3 or more years. Only 5% are engaged in cloud repatriation by bringing those cloud services back in-house. Why do we care? Gartner says that'll be 95% by 2025, so the math is adding up. This is another data point on the trend. Not groundbreaking, but it links very clearly the prediction. It's an obvious direction that does not seem to have all the implications being addressed in many ways. Some updates on Log4Shell. CISA Director Jen Easterly briefed the industry yesterday and stated that the bug is one of the most serious I've seen in my entire career, if not the most serious. We expect the vulnerability to be widely exploited by sophisticated actors, and we have limited time to take necessary steps in order to reduce the likelihood of damage. CISA has also instructed federal agencies to patch by Christmas Eve. I'm also including a reference to Royce Williams' work compiling over 300 vendors and their current status, and a list managed by the Dutch National Cybersecurity Center. There are other security stories out there too besides Log4Shell. This year, we're already at a new record for security vulnerabilities, having broken 2020's record, which has been the trend for the past 5 years. Each has topped the previous. A bright spot? There are fewer high-risk ones than in 2020. Reporting of bugs is also up. HackerOne notes a 20% increase from last year in reporting. The median payout is also up 13% and 30% for high-severity bugs. All these issues are causing a lack of confidence in legacy IT vendors. Per research from Vance & Bourne and CrowdStrike, organizations question whether traditional technology firms provide sufficient security protections to enterprise customers. According to the report, almost 2/3 of respondents said their organization is losing confidence in legacy IT providers, such as Microsoft, due to the increasing frequency of supply chain attacks. The research also shows that 45% of respondents have experienced at least one supply chain attack over the past 12 months, up from 32% in 2018. Why do we care? I'll keep covering any Log4Shell items that are newsworthy, but echo yesterday that it isn't noteworthy. Run your security playbook here. If you're in the security management business, I'm also making an expectation and assumption that I'm not your only source of information. The bigger picture is that lack of confidence. The adage of doing the same thing and expecting different results being insanity resonates. Of course, this is dragging down confidence. The question to track is, will this change buying behavior? Until that, or regulation, happen, we should expect more of the same. Revisiting some work trends, Axios is reporting on the shift in holiday parties, a combination of small in-person gatherings and bigger virtual ones. Of course, SAP SE is just giving workers $100 to expense holiday celebrations. Because Zoom fatigue might be because of out-of-sync brainwaves. Julie Boland, professor of psychology and linguistics at the University of Michigan, presented research pointing to the transmission lag as the reason for strain. The lag adds too much variability for brainwaves to sync with speech rates automatically, and thus the human brain needs to compensate. Of course, that fatigue doesn't mean workers want to go back to the office. Microsoft commissioned a study, and some 51% would quit if the current mix of remote and office work vanished. 59% of HR decision makers agreed that hybrid working has had a positive effect on the mental well-being of their workforce. It's not all easy, of course. 42% reported they've struggled to form relationships with new colleagues. 33% reported a lack of direction from managers. 24% said they struggled to learn new software and applications. 23% failing to earn the confidence of colleagues, and 21% not feeling the company culture. This retention concern is still top of mind. Succession challenges and the ability to attract and retain top talent vaulted to the number 2 ranking of business risks, up from number 8 a year ago per a survey by Protiviti and NC State University. And Axios reports that the talent shortage is driving some of the M&A activity. Buying a company for talent is a way to address worker shortages. Why do we care? Tactically, every business owner has likely struggled with their holiday plans, which are part of that culture discussion. Building ways for organizations to build relationships and earn that confidence need to be deliberate and require new tactics. It's fascinating to me to track the science of remote work, similar to the Microsoft research last year on how humans are not used to seeing themselves on screen. That often leads to specific changes to the use of the technology, which makes forward improvements. Understanding and tracking that research is required to address the work from anywhere opportunity beyond implementing technology. From the Washington Post, President Biden on Monday signed an executive order seeking to streamline and modernize a vast array of government services that directly affect Americans, such as claiming retirement benefits, renewing passports, and filing taxes. In a fact sheet released ahead of the signing, the White House detailed numerous other examples of interactions with government customers that can be improved through more online access and streamlined application processes. Quote, whether searching for vaccine safety information, claiming retirement benefits, receiving health insurance, passing through a security checkpoint, or checking the status of a farm loan application, Americans expect government services to be responsive to their needs, the fact sheet said. But too often, people have to navigate a tangled web of government websites, offices, and phone numbers to access the services they depend on. The executive order identifies 36 customer experiences across 17 federal agencies that can be improved. The intention is to use USA.gov as the digital front door for government services. Why do we care? If you want to see a final outcome of a trend, it's when governments adopt it. That's not necessarily a criticism. You don't always want your government at the bleeding edge, do you? Viewing citizens as customers and implementing customer experience management is smart. It also raises the general floor for businesses. If the IRS experience improves digitally, how much will customers tolerate poor digital experiences? Not much. It's worth considering as you ponder the investment happening here. Oh, and there are clearly tons of projects in flight around the government to address this. Are you still relying on a frustrating patchwork of legacy solutions? Modernize your cybersecurity and data protection with Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud. It's a single solution that combines backup, anti-malware, and endpoint protection management. As an MSP, you can easily improve client security posture, eliminate complexity, and generate more recurring revenue. Learn more about Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud at acronis.com. I have a feeling Log4j will be a topic to update for a few days. Here's some new headlines. Checkpoint Software is reporting more than 800,000 attempts to launch attacks 72 hours after the initial reports. That's jumped exponentially since the initial attacks on Saturday. Attackers have now attempted to exploit the issue in over 40% of global networks. System integrators, VARs, and distributors are the most impacted organization by industry, with ISPs and MSPs in the number 3 spot. A second vulnerability has been discovered and a patch released. It addresses a problem with the original fix, as it was, quote, incomplete in certain non-default configurations. The new fix is in Log4j 2.16.0. Now, why do we care? Because it's tactical. If you're generally in IT, you'd better be broadly tracking this one. How about some Cyberinsurance stats? Thanks to listener Steve, I was tipped off to the Net Diligence 2021 Annual Cyber Claims Study. 99% of the claims reviewed were small to medium enterprises, although that's defined as less than $2 billion in revenue. In 2021, more than 46% of companies are opting to obtain cyber insurance coverage, and they're finding their premiums have skyrocketed because loss ratios for standalone cyber insurance have risen to 73%. Since 2016, the proportion of claims caused by criminal activities has ranged from a high of 83% to a low of 69%. The proportion of claims caused by non-criminal activities decreased from 28% in 2019 to 17% in 2020. And this observation, quote, "There's no clear correlation between the size of an entity and the magnitude of a cyber-related loss. Sometimes a smaller organization will experience a very expensive claim, greater than $100 million, and a large organization will have a claim so small, at less than $5,000, that it makes one wonder why the claim was filed in the first place. In fact, the most expensive incident during the 5-year period occurred at an SME. Why do we care? The granularity of the data, 2 billion is not small by my definition, makes some of the claims of little difference between big and small of questionable merit. But then again, if this is the way the industry is measured, does it matter what I think? So roughly 3/4 of incidents are criminally based, or 1/4 is non-criminal. Both views have some merit. My big takeaway here remains the 73% increase in loss ratios. That's unsustainable, so expect premiums to continue to go up, and the barrier to entry to come right along with it. Let's talk today about users. Researchers at ETH Zurich conducted a large-scale phishing study with an unnamed company to understand phishing attacks, and the data contradicts standard best practices. Contradicting earlier studies, gender does not correlate with phishing susceptibility. Instead, the study found that younger and older people are more prone to clicking on phishing links, so age is a crucial factor. Moreover, those who use specialized software for repetitive tasks are more likely to fall for phishing traps compared to those who do not need computers for their day-to-day jobs. An interesting finding in the ETH study is that employees continuously exposed to phishing eventually fall for it, as 32.1% of the study participants clicked on at least one dangerous link or attachment. Warnings on suspicious emails were found to be effective, but this effectiveness didn't grow as the warning messages got more detailed, which is a new finding. Why do we care? This is interesting new data, with that finding that warnings on suspicious emails are effective, but the effectiveness doesn't grow in detail, and the finding that voluntarily embedded training in simulation is ineffective, and that it actually made employees more susceptible to phishing. My big takeaway was focusing on the tech, not just the idea that you need filtering and layered security. Instead, that repetitive task detail. Building systems that minimize the damage and don't create dullness to what users are doing seems like a decisive direction. This story from Politico, quoting directly. The Internet Association, once branded as Silicon Valley's most important trade group in Washington, announced Wednesday that it is shutting down. The organization offered no specific reason for its decision to disband, which Politico had reported Tuesday night. But the group has struggled with financial woes after Microsoft pulled its support earlier this year. It has fought to maintain relevance on Capitol Hill despite being torn by competing pressures from its huge and smaller member companies on issues like antitrust. And a relevant quote. This org could have saved itself years ago by kicking out everyone with a market cap greater than $500 billion, i.e. GAFA, tweeted Yelp's Senior Vice President of Public Policy, Luther Lowe, using a common industry acronym for Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. I made this suggestion to the leadership a few years ago, but it was shot down, so we quit. Why do we care? The biggest companies have their own lobbyists. Ultimately, they don't need these organizations anymore, and as they aren't figuring out that dynamic themselves, well, that's why they fail. IA was a single trade group. We saw CompTIA, another industry trade association, pull out of lobbying entirely. And so we care because this leaves that need unanswered. The National Society of IT Service Providers is gearing up and working to step into that space for providers, but isn't there yet. With regulation top of mind for lawmakers around tech, it's pretty essential to have a voice there. And from my vantage point, there are fewer representing us, not more. Want a bit of summary on the confusion of the return to work? Well, thanks, Axios, quoting extensively. In the 22 months since U.S. companies sent their workers home, they've collected troves of poll data, paid workplace consultants billions of dollars, and drafted plan after plan. But they still don't know much more about post-pandemic work than they did in March 2020. Not only do companies not have a return-to-work date, they also don't exactly know what that return to work will look like. Senior employees and young early career workers want to return to the office full-time, but a vast majority of the middle wants a flexible hybrid work week. Quote, "It's way more complex and way more difficult to make that transition to hybrid than we thought," says Brian Kropp, head of Gartner's Human Resources practice. "It's going to take another 2 to 3 years at least. It is that big of a change." That's because marrying remote and in-person work is not a technology problem like we originally thought, Kropp says. It's a consistency and evenness of experience question. And in an update to this confusion, Apple has indefinitely delayed their return to the office. In an email sent Wednesday, the return date is yet to be determined, and employees are all getting a $1,000 bonus for work-from-home needs. This after similar moves from Meta and Google. CNBC acquired an internal Google memo that outlines its plan for unvaccinated workers. Employees who haven't been vaccinated could be put on forced leave and then let go from the company if they fail to follow its COVID-19 rules. Why do we care? There's the key. Return to work isn't a technology problem. Sure, technology enables the experience, but creating that consistency and evenness is a process problem, and thus a consulting one. It's why this space appeals to me. The risk for IT providers is that if they only offer the technology portion, they aren't the solution provider, and the choice of words there is deliberate. We're not any closer to an answer than we were 18 months ago, but more importantly, the status quo does not appear to be changing anytime soon. It seems MSPs are moving on security. According to a recent Kaspersky survey, 28% of managed services providers reported that a massive supply chain attack on an MSP software provider revealed in December 2020 had affected their organization in some way. The breach also had a wider impact on the majority of MSPs. Overall, 72% of providers took action in response to the attack, even though they were not affected. That's in survey data released by Zawaya. A letter from the Deputy National Security Advisor and the National Cyber Director was issued from the White House, urging the private sector to boost cyber defenses for the holidays. Quote, "Historically, we have seen breaches around national holidays because criminals know that security operations centers are often short-staffed, delaying the discovery of intrusions," they wrote. A recent breach disclosure of an Oregon healthcare organization appears to have accidentally revealed that the FBI believes the Hello Kitty ransomware group operates out of Ukraine. This is new information not previously released. And in Log4j news, CISA said they had not confirmed reports by multiple security companies of ransomware installations or attempts by other governments to steal secrets. Quote, "We are not seeing widespread, highly sophisticated intrusion campaigns," Eric Goldstein, Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at CISA, said in a call with reporters. On the same day, Microsoft's threat intelligence team indicated that hackers associated with the governments of China, Iran, North Korea, and Turkey have been trying to find ways to leverage the Apache Log4j vulnerability. The first public case of the vulnerability being used to download and install ransomware has been discovered by researchers. Bitdefender reported they found it directly. Finally, some details of cybersecurity that made it into the approved National Defense Authorization Act. It greenlights CISA's Cyber Sentry program, focusing on critical infrastructure, and also requires DoD to submit a report on how its Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, program impacts small businesses. Why do we care? So I'm reserving judgment on CMMC. I've heard strong voices saying it's critically important for smaller providers, and others I trust saying it isn't. And that's version 2.0 is too neutered to matter. Hearing from the DoD itself on what they think the impact will be seems savvy to me. All my talk about the changes that broadband access in the US will bring? The Commerce Secretary held a roundtable Wednesday where this was exactly discussed. Quoting generously from Axios, Gina Romanato led the discussion with leaders and female business owners to discuss broadband access and economic empowerment. She highlighted the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute study that found that women are more likely to use platforms like Airbnb, Etsy, or eBay rather than transportation platforms like Uber or DoorDash. Airbnb co-founder and chief strategy officer Nathan Blexarlik said women make up 60% of the hosts for the home rental company and described Wi-Fi as a critical amenity. Having connectivity in these rural areas empowers hosts to participate, he said. eBay's CEO Jamie Enanone said that rural businesses are outpacing urban business in 3/4 of states. Why do we care? And everything described providers would power. There's a space even in those micro businesses, but more importantly, it's my experience that the press simply isn't digging into the services businesses that spring up, and instead focusing on those consumer ones. Thus, the same surge seen around Etsy or eBay sellers can be seen in small business growth, and why we care about broadband investment. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content is here because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSP Radio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links are at businessof.tech. Talk to you again next week.